report, and you're right, and it became a joke. The Saw movies that were out like this time every year for a long time, and you're absolutely correct. And I think the first two of them were the best. After that, kind of went down to the torture porn kind of thing going on. If I want to see torture porn, I'll throw in the movie Hostel. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah,
Quentin Tarantino's, if that's really what I'm in the mood for, which I'm never in the mood for that. But thank God. Why don't you go ahead and give us the rundown? What was his young life like? John Kramer, rather. What was his young life like?
We don't, as far as I'm aware, we don't know a lot about his young life. So what I did was kind of assume that it was somewhat uneventful, somewhat normative. And it actually seems that way because he had a stable sort of early adulthood. He became a very successful civil engineer.
Yep.
And he got married to a woman named Jill Tuck, that he described as the love of his life, and they were happily married. There was, supposedly no, marital turmoil. He was happy in his marriage. And they were both employed outside the home. So he was a civil engineer working on, real estate, and she ran a recovery clinic for drug and alcohol addicts.
Really? So, they were normal people that had good jobs. You would think the normal American family, she worked in the medical field pretty much, and he was a civil engineer. What tripped his trigger?
Well, she, had this, the motto of her center was cherish your life as the philosophy. And, she seems like a very kind person. She eventually became pregnant with their child. But, she was working kind of a higher risk job. Working in a drug and alcohol center has risks that come with it. And during her pregnancy, there were some reckless actions of one of her patients, which caused her to miscarry that child, which meant everything to John.
So he decided to take it out on the world?
Not at first. No, he didn't just go to that extreme at first. It caused discord in the marriage, and they did get divorced. And this is not necessarily uncommon after miscarriages, and certainly not after a child dies. So he lost that stability of having Jill in his life, and it spiraled out of control from there. He became more and more depressed, but he was trying to go on with his life. But then he goes to a routine medical appointment and gets a diagnosis of colon cancer with an inoperable brain tumor.
Oh, boy, he kind of got the double whammy right there.
Talk about pain, first of all. Colon cancer, extremely painful.
I've heard it's a pain in the butt.
Oh, God. Really? It's very bad, and a brain tumor not necessarily is painful, but it will kill you.
Yeah. Colon cancer is very, very deadly, and try not to make fun of it. I'm sorry about that. I do apologize. It is not a pain in the butt. It is a pain in the colon. And
yes, it's terrible,
checked.
hard to treat, and definitely get checked. But this, he was already kind of depressed by the demise of the marriage and the miscarriage, right? So then he goes to the doctor trying to take care of himself, and he finds out, you don't have long to live. So this really, spiraled him out of control, and he attempted suicide. And I'm going to say this, guys, please don't get mad at me. In typical male fashion, he decided to go out in a blaze of glory. Women tend to
sexist.
I know, right? I'm a sexist pig. It's horrible.
Well, you know what? You may as well go all the bang rather than whimper. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly right. He drove his car over a cliff.
Yeah, come on. That's one of the biggest bangs.
It really very well, and I shouldn't be sexist because Thelma and Louise kind of did the same thing. So anyway,
they really did, and they had a pact to do it too. They even held hands, so that's even worse.
It is worse. Yeah, well, he did not die after doing this.
Wow, he's a tough son of a gun, let me tell you.
No kidding. So he survived this attempt, and after and this is also not uncommon. Being a suicide risk expert, this is not uncommon when someone has an attempt that is very potentially lethal. They either come out of it and continue to be suicidal, or they come out of it with a kind of a totally different perspective. And that's what happened with John Kramer. He felt like he could sort of see more clearly that you need to cherish your life, really, kind of the motto of the clinic.
Life is precious.
Don't waste it, the time you have.
Yeah.
But he kind of went in a more morbid direction with that.
Well, he kind of did. He started killing people. How precious could life be if he's devising mechanical things to kill people?
Well, okay, that is not fair now, Joel, because he was not killing people. The people just didn't have the ingenuity to escape.
Sorry, they weren't all masters in engineering to figure out that,
I know, right?
So really they were behind the 8 ball anyway. You walk into a place that where, you pull your hand out and it cuts your hand off. He played on the human, really what he did was he played on the human emotion and the human reaction to things, and he knew these reactions, and he made his gadgets, if you will, deadly enough to play on those reactions.
And he also tried to choose people in his mind that he felt like maybe didn't deserve to live because they had done something that he felt was unethical.
What makes him the godlike person to be able to do that?
Well, he's a psychopath, so most of them
Well,
that
is true. That is true. God complex.
Yeah, very narcissistic. But the thing that makes him so unique, not just the puzzles that he wanted people to try to escape from, but the fact that he was typically present in some form during all of these killing sessions, either, physically like he was in the first Saw, or, communicating through this Billy puppet, which is a surrogate. Yeah. So it leaves him a mystery and makes him even more creepy and mysterious. If you do survive it.
Maybe you need that separation so he didn't feel so guilty.
I doubt it.
If he was not physically present there and someone's died, it wasn't like, he could be like, well, it wasn't my fault. There wasn't out. It was right there, and they just didn't take it, see?
Well, you might be onto something, though, Joel. I mean, the fact that he wasn't able to sort of look them in the face while this is happening, it does say something about him.
Yeah, he didn't have enough balls, so to speak, to confront these people. He would really rather just kill them and not discuss what they've done and maybe counsel people, which would be the better route to go, rather than making mechanical destruction devices.
Exactly. He's trying to use mortal terror as a motivator, and while that might work in the short term, it doesn't work in the long term.
No, gosh, no. I don't advocate anyone making any gadgets to kill each other, and quite honestly, it's the character now. Spoiler alert, but it's 10 years ago. Spoiler alert. He is dead. He did die in one of the Saws. He did succumb, I do believe, to his illness.
He did,
and so he is no longer with us. But my gosh, talk about just smart, being really smart. In fact, we're joking. Hannibal Lecter versus John Kramer, who'd win? Pitting them both against each other. They're almost equal in intelligence.
They are some of the most intelligent, horror icons, iconic villains that I came across. And the thing that I found so fascinating researching this, and I'm really glad that, that you guys really asked me to look into this, because I wasn't necessarily going to do this. It's not what I do, is profile fictional characters. But what I found really ubiquitous across all the horror genres is that, like Eric, like you were saying, there's something relatable, right, about that villain. Even Hannibal Lecter, there's something relatable.
You got to have that because, deep down inside of us, each and every one of us, at our lower brain is a killer.
Well, and we also want revenge against those people that we feel have wronged us. And Jigsaw is one of those, he is seeking some sort of moral justice, even if it's skewed and weird.
Evidently, Jigsaw never got the memo that the best revenge is living well.
Yeah, good point. He didn't have long to live.
That is true. Yeah, you're right, though. He was figuring, lights up for me anyway, so I might as well take as many of these morons as I can take with me.
Was there a specific incident that triggered him? Boy, that's the big term these days. My kids use it, ironically. I'm triggered. Oh, I'm triggered. Oh, I'm triggered.
Yeah, I just tripped my trigger.
You're triggering me. You are triggering me right now. I'm hearing this all the time. Anyway, was there something specific? Was this a gradual path from way back, or was he really okay as he appeared to be until something specific happened? Was the suicide attempt, or was it the divorce? Was there one thing, or was it a series of things? What are your thoughts on how he ended up being this person?
Well, I think that he was probably, this is going to sound bad, but I think he was probably sort of always this person. He had to have psychopathic tendencies to do what he did. So my guess is that, he was kind of always this person underneath, but he found somebody that he could relate to in Jill, somebody that made him a better person. And he was looking forward to having a child with her. And when that got taken away from him, he felt very cheated. And so my guess is that is what was the trigger, because I think that John Kramer himself would say it was the suicide attempt that was the trigger. Mm-hmm. But suicide, especially driving off of a cliff, is violence toward the self. He is already committing violence at that point.
Yeah.
So when you're already trying to off yourself, which is what I consider violence toward the self, the trigger was before that. So I've had people say to me that they were violent because they attempted suicide and it didn't work. And I'm like, no, you were violent before that.
Well, yeah, generally they are. And it's mostly, have you noticed that there are not very many female serial killers in cinema?
There aren't, and okay, here's the hard part, I think, about women, is that women's victims tend to be children or weaker women.
That
Eileen Vernos is an exception to that. As a true serial killer, Eileen Vernos is definitely the exception. There are many women serial killers out there. Many, many, many. Yeah. Most of their victims tend to be children.
Yeah. Well, they do. You're correct. Usually,
and I think it's too hard. It's too hard to fictionalize that and have the audience stomach it.
Well, you have to have some. Even Michael Myers, like we said, there is some compassion towards the character. We all have had that moment where we'd be just so mad we could kill. But of course we have our normal, rational brain kicks in, saying, well, A, it's not worth the prison time, and B, could you live with yourself afterwards?
Well, there's horror, the horror genre. Like I hate when people down the horror genre of films. Like they're stupid or they're bad entertainment or whatever, because they really are modern sort of parables about. They're morality tales. They're about ethics. They're about virtues, because virgins, are typically not necessarily a target. Well, people that are not virginal are.
Yeah.
It's a modern morality tale. They're more complex than people give them credit for.
Do you think that like a movie like a Friday the 13th, where it's just Jason Voorhees murdering people, do you think in some ways, somewhere in our brain, in our subconscious, we're vicariously living through that character?
Oh, yeah, we have to be. Humans are, that's the weird part about society now, people worrying about video games, worrying about, like we were talking about The Walking Dead earlier, worrying about that being on television. One of the reasons that I do not worry about that kind of thing is because as humans, we are violent. Yeah. We are an apex predator. And when you look at historical times, even going back to Victorian times, which was not that long ago, there was so much more blood and gore and violence on a daily basis their faces. So watching The Walking Dead, the only thing I'm concerned about is that now we're removed from it. That concerns me.
Yeah, we are away from, that time in history where, the guillotine was in vogue and things were just horrific. I was reading an article, someone had written, he was a psychologist saying, at one point in not American, but in world history as humans, disembowelings were very common in the town square.
Yes, and mental institutions, if you could call them that, were more like dungeons with big picture windows where people could walk by and observe the person being either, in restraints or in an isolation box.
Sure.
I mean, it was terribly brutal, but at the same time, you weren't removed from it by a computer screen or a television screen. It was right there in front of you. It was a neighbor, a friend, or somebody that someone knew. There was a humanity to it. That was different.
Do we as humans need that, though? Do we need the horror genre? Because there is this inherited lust for blood to some extent?
Well, we don't do anything violent anymore. We're not allowed to. Like, kids aren't allowed to. Well, no, kids aren't allowed to push each other down on the playground anymore.
That is true. There is no more backyard fights. There is no after-school fights. No,
I mean, come on. Like a kid can't play tag and accidentally push another kid down anymore because their parents will get charged with assault.
Well, this is the age of everybody gets a trophy for participating, that everyone's equal, and that there should be no pecking order. And I remember being a young guy in the 1990s when I was in high school, it was fairly common to see an after-school brawl between two guys duking it out.